Hey, well, tonight I'm angry at standing armies, and the problem is we have one. And this goes counter to the original intention of our founding fathers, who were well aware of the risks to a standing army. And let's go back 2,000 years to illustrate how dangerous a standing army can be. There's a fellow you may have heard of, Julius Caesar, who used to be a governor in the northern part of Italy and commanded a large number of troops. And he was summoned back to Rome, and he was expressly told, do not bring your troops. As a matter of fact, for a general to bring his troops into Rome would be considered a declaration of war. And in 49 BC, Julius Caesar did bring the 13th Legion across the river into Rome. The river was called the Rubicon, and to this day, crossing the Rubicon is a phrase describing a point of no return. And this is the risk of a standing army, the risk that the army decides that they don't need civilian oversight, that they know better. And God forbid there's a domestic discord giving the military an excuse to come into the cities and take control. And we faced something very similar to that earlier this year when mostly peaceful protests tempted Trump and other law and order type candidates to consider deploying the military, which is a terrible idea, although having rioting in the streets is barely better. But let's look at what evidence we have that we need to be concerned about our standing army. And the big concern is that people who are in positions of power within our military think nothing of criticizing, commenting on, or disputing our civilian commander-in-chief's commands. Let's look at what happened just recently when President Trump announced that he wanted all the troops out of Afghanistan. I'll point out that we've been fighting in Afghanistan for almost 20 years. Nobody can really tell you why we're fighting in Afghanistan. It was believed that the Taliban were supporting bin Laden and had been involved in the 9/11 attacks of almost 20 years ago. It turns out that it was mostly Saudi Arabia, not Afghanistan, and yet almost 20 years later, we're still in Afghanistan, and Trump has actually made efforts to try to reduce our troop presence overseas. He's tried to get troops out of Afghanistan, which we've just talked about. He's tried to get troops out of Syria. Every time he tries to withdraw troops from their engagements overseas, the military stymies him. They stand in his way. They give all kinds of reasons as to why they can't. For example, regarding the most recent Afghanistan withdrawal, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Miller, did dispute Trump's opinion that troops should be withdrawn. He claimed that there was conditions that needed to be met. He claimed that this couldn't be done on Trump's timetable. I don't know why the military feels that they're not subject to civilian oversight. This is a very slippery slope. I don't appreciate the military issuing conflicting commentary from their commander. Anybody who's in the military who disputes what the commander-in-chief says should resign. It is very much a command order, formality-based system, and if you don't agree with your commanding officer, you should be either fired or forced to resign, because the risk is that the military will take over. They are an army. They are a military force, and if we, Democrats and Republicans alike, give them an excuse, they will take over. They have throughout history. You can look at numerous examples of this, and it's very hard to find examples that don't apply. Even 250 years ago, when our country was being founded, our founding fathers knew full well the risks of a standing army and warned their heirs and successors against such a thing. And yet here we are now. This is as of 10 years ago. We were in 150 different countries. The US is in 150 different countries, and I challenge any one of you to name 150 countries. I doubt that I could name 150 countries, yet we have troops there ready to fight. And when Donald Trump accused the military of always looking for reasons to fight because they wanted to spend money, because I don't know if you realize this, but if you're a top general and you advocate for an expensive weapons program, when you retire from the military, you can rely on that military program company giving you a cushy job, lobbying Congress, being on the board, whichever. It is very much a pay-for-play kind of a system. And I'll point out the Army Chief of Staff, General James McConville, pushed back, saying that he and his colleagues only recommend putting troops in harm's way as a last resort and would never want endless wars to please defense contractors. I don't think anybody needs to hear any commentary from any military person as to whether we are involved in too many wars. We know that we are. These wars never end. How many people died in the Vietnam War? For what? What did those deaths accomplish? Maybe it delayed communist incursions into the Far East. Maybe it didn't. But today we know Vietnam is a manufacturing country and a friend of ours. What did all of our brave soldiers who died die for? Nobody knows. Nobody can tell you. There are always reasons being given by the military as to why we need to be there, why we have to be there, why we need to remove bad actors around the planet. Our kids are risking death to accomplish these actions. And the bigger the military branches get, the more dangerous they become. They are a threat to us. We don't know we're going to be able to keep control of the reins. It's like having a tiger by the tail. The bigger these military branches get, the more danger there is that when we bring them home, they will be a threat domestically. The military needs to be kept control of. We need to keep a firm hand on the reins. The first sign of a potential mutiny is when the military starts criticizing their leader publicly. I'm sure they've been doing it for years privately, but for a military officer to criticize his leader publicly, it just shows that we have started down that slippery slope. Before it's too late, let's wake up.